I wonder tonight, how is it with your soul? At the beginning of Lent, on Ash Wednesday, I asked this question during a sermon. And actually, this question has stuck with me all throughout Lent. This question was, of course, the favourite question of the great Methodist preacher, John Wesley, who asked his church small groups this question at the beginning of every session. If only we could take this question back and ask it to everyone involved on the first Maundy Thursday to see what everyone was thinking. As I'm sure we would get many different responses. I wonder, if you were to ask anyone at the Passover meal in the upper room this question, who would you ask it to? I wonder, how was it with their souls? Maybe the most obvious person we would think to ask this question of is Jesus. Jesus had already had quite a week and caused quite a bit of a stir. He paraded into Jerusalem as a peaceful king on a donkey, in fulfillment of a prophecy by the Old Testament prophet Zechariah. He has overturned tables of the money changers in the temple, taught on the Mount of Olives, critiqued the Pharisees over their hypocrisy. He's preached on the kingdom heaven and the coming judgment of God. And he has spoken of his imminent death and has been anointed for burial. Now he finds himself in the upper room, where there is a lot that's about to happen. This includes Jesus washing his disciples' feet. Jesus in this act shows his disciples he loves them. And in doing so, he sets out for them a practical and spiritual example for them all to follow. That they should be willing to serve just as his teacher had served. And he gives them a new mandate, a new commandment to love one another. We also know, despite the author of the Gospel of John making a theological choice, not to mention as he wanted to focus more on Jesus' teaching and prophecy, Jesus also institutes the Eucharist, as he asks his disciples to do this, to eat bread and drink wine in remembrance of him. Jesus knows he's about to die. And as we will hear later in our service in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus' emotions on this are quite clear in the terror he's feeling. And finally, we also see that Jesus knew he is to be betrayed. Having loved and traveled with his disciples for 3 years, he knew what all his disciples were going to do. Judas, of course, is about to betray him again. But it wasn't just him who would prove to be a poor disciple. The only one who stuck with Jesus and followed him to his trial was Peter. Yet, he too was to deny knowing him. And the only one to accompany him, Jesus, to his crucifixion was his disciple John, as the rest had already deserted him. It was only earlier in the week, on the walk to Jerusalem, that the disciples had discussed with each other Who was the greatest disciple? James and John's mother had even asked if her twins could sit at Jesus' right and left in his kingdom. She certainly thought her children were the greatest disciples. I wonder how Jesus' soul was at this point, knowing what they were all about to do. And then there is Peter. I wonder how his soul was during the Passover meal. He certainly felt unworthy for Jesus to wash his feet. It was only after Jesus said, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me," that he agreed to let Jesus do this. But yet, despite not feeling worthy, he was confident in his own will. Having dedicated his life to following Jesus, he believed that there was nothing that could stop him in following him. He even exclaims during the meal, "I will lay down my life for you." I wonder how he felt when Jesus answered him, "Will you really lay down your life for me? Very truly, I tell you, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. Peter had already been told by Jesus that Jesus was going to die soon. And now he was being told by Jesus that he was going to deny him 3 times within the next few hours. Did Peter really believe what he was hearing? I wonder how his soul felt like in that upper room. And finally, what about Judas? What was going on in Judas' soul in that upper room? Judas had just let Jesus, his teacher, intimately wash his feet. Yet, he knew what he was going to do to Jesus. The day before, he had gone to the chief priests to ask what they were willing to give him for his betrayal of Jesus. They counted 30 pieces of silver, and this was enough for him to betray his friend. What was Judas thinking? He had followed Jesus around for years and watched him do many miracles. Yet, now he was willing to sell the life of Jesus to the high priests. What would possess him to do that? For those of you who were at our showing of the Passion last Sunday evening, we saw a very interesting and arguably a very generous portrayal of Judas. In this, we see Judas being portrayed as being coerced by the Jewish authorities. They argued to him that Jesus was causing a disturbance which could threaten the whole establishment of the law, as it could inflame the Roman authorities. It suggested that Jesus must be stopped at all costs to save the Jewish cultural establishment, making Judas's betrayal of him that is something that should be done for the good of the institution. We know in John 11 that the Jewish authorities say, if we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation. Then Caiaphas, the high priest, spoke up and said, you do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than the whole nation to perish. But was that Jesus' motive? That he was sticking up for the Jewish establishment in his actions? We don't know. Different people have different opinions. But I think probably not. We know from verses in the Bible that Judas was a thief and stole from the common money bag. It was likely his own selfish self-interest was what led him to betray Jesus. It was primarily for the money. It seems here he chose not to serve God, but to serve mammon. But yet, a question hangs over this passage, which is omitted from our reading tonight. What does it mean that Satan entered into Judas? Was it Satan that was responsible for this betrayal? Or was it Judas's personal responsibility? Or is it more complicated than just picking one? The theologian David Ford says that to answer this question of betrayal, we must read through the Gospels to understand the wider context of Judas. Jesus, throughout the Gospels, loved his disciples, including Judas. Yet it is written that early in the Gospel that Judas already has a corrupt heart. Judas then later objects to Mary anointing Jesus with expensive perfume. This was because his thought was that it was a waste of money. If only it could have been sold and added to the purse. So, of course, he could steal some of it. In John's Gospel, he is also set within a larger context of evil. It's as if he's been influenced by Satan already, out of his own choice. Judas has already set out his path before him. He's had the choice of loving and serving Jesus, who is identified with love and truth. And he's had the choice to serve Satan, the father of lies and evil. Judas has already walked the path of evil. He has chosen Satan over Jesus. And now he allows himself to follow this path and walk in evil by opening his heart to the devil. As Jesus then gives permission to Satan and Judas to both work their evil scheme together. I wonder how Judas's soul was that night. We know later he felt remorse after Jesus' death. But did he feel anything else that night as he was about to betray his friend? None of us truly know what everyone in the upper room was feeling that night. Yet, it was the last truly intimate moments that Jesus and all the 12 of his disciples spent together in the same place. As we reflect on those who were present that evening, I wonder who stood out for you in the experiences that you have heard. Do any of them in particular resonate with your soul tonight? Let's take a short time to reflect on these events before we come to our confession.